We good? Hi, I'm Labor Allen. Welcome to the Tales of the Fabulously Healthy. Actually, what we're going to discuss this evening is how you can balance your emotions. Probably if there is anything that's more important to enjoying life, I don't know what it would be other than actually having balanced emotions so that you can experience life to the fullest capability as is humanly possible. And the problem is that very often as we go throughout life, one of the things that bothers us the most is the ability to keep a balanced perspective, a balanced viewpoint, and deal with things such as stress, anxiety, depression, etc. So this evening we're going to be talking about how you can do that, how you can balance your emotions. And it isn't difficult. I should say it's simple, but it can also be challenging. So let's get right down to it. So the first thing, in order to have balanced emotions, it has a lot to do with what we've talked about at length in most of our seminars, and that is actually we have to have a balanced biochemistry. So without balanced biochemistry, there really is absolutely no hope of ever having balanced emotions. And so what does that mean? Basically that means that our body, our organs, our glandular system has to be functioning well. We have to have what's called homeostasis, which means internal balance, maybe not of a Zen nature, but at least of a biochemical one. And the reason for that is that each one of our organs is actually responsible for certain emotions. So, for example, if we tend to have anger often, what we might actually be experiencing is liver dysfunction, or a liver that is not in balance. And the reasons for that, not as per se as far as liver, but as far as why, if our organs are not balanced, we will have emotional distress, if you will, we will actually be going into in detail this evening and the importance of that. So anyway, just for now, realize that each one of the emotions that we have, there is an organ linked to it. And so if we're having disruptions within the function of that organ, then we will have more of a propensity towards the emotions associated with that organ. So how do you balance your biochemistry? Well, as I said earlier, we pretty much always discuss that within our classes, and basically it has to do with diet, making sure you're eating the proper foods, number one, and number two, supplementing with targeted nutrition the areas of your body that need support. So that's basically how you maintain biochemistry. Now, what can happen even with balanced biochemistry is that there can be situations, circumstances, events that unbalance our biochemistry to the point, due to those situations, that now we have emotions that can, in effect, become caught within those areas of the body. So let me explain how that works. This is basically the second part, or step two, to maintaining your balanced emotions, or creating balanced emotions. And what happens is that we have an area in the brain. You know, it seems like all of my holistic classes go into Anatomy and Physiology 101. But nonetheless, we have an area in the brain. It's called the Limbic System. And what the limbic system is responsible for is generating emotion. So we have thoughts. Thoughts will create emotion. Okay, so we have thought. And that goes into emotion. And so different systems of the brain are responsible for producing a thought. All right? And the limbic system, again, is responsible for creating this. So we have thoughts linked to emotion. Now, just because the brain has generated this emotion, we don't necessarily even know that we have that emotion until our physical body starts responding to it. That's when we perceive an emotion, no matter what it is, good, bad, negative, positive, joy, anger, hate, whatever. Okay? So the way that that works is that from the limbic system, communication is sent to a part of the brain that's called the hippocampus. And basically the hippocampus job is to decide what the appropriate physical response would be to what this emotion is that the limbic system has generated. So once the hippocampus has decided what that is, then it sends that to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is a gland in the brain next to the pituitary gland, next to, in relationship, the pituitary gland. And basically the hypothalamus now will tell the endocrine system, or our hormonal system, how we should be responding to this emotion. And from there, with the secretion of those hormones, of those biochemicals, we have the emotional response. So if you start looking at it in a biochemical way, every emotion we have is actually a matter of biochemistry or a biochemical. And so if we have a major event, if we have a serious trauma, or if we have a constant thought process, then it leads to overexposure of this particular biochemical. And that's how it can start affecting certain organs of the body, because those organs are what is responsible. They're usually the eliminatory pathways for those particular biochemicals. All right? So what emotions are associated with what organs? That would also be helpful to know. So let's go over that. I already told you one, liver. Liver is oftentimes associated with anger. And it's interesting to note that our organs have pairs. So the liver's pair is the gallbladder, and the gallbladder's emotion is frustration or resentment. So why is this helpful? Well, you can look at it in reverse. If you tend to have, for example, one of these three emotions on a consistent basis, then you start understanding what organ is actually having a dysfunction or a deficiency, if you will. So in a way, you can use it as a self-diagnostic device if you know what emotions pair with what organs. All right? So if you tend to feel frustrated a lot, you know that either your gallbladder is having an issue, or if you're just in a situation which frustration is an appropriate reaction, but you're constantly in that situation, then at some point you're going to have a gallbladder dysfunction, okay, or a gallbladder issue, if you will. So it works both ways. All right, you can already have that organ dysfunction, which is creating the emotion, or the constant, consistent emotion can create a problem with the organ. All right. So what are some others? Because it's kind of fun, right? So.
Nervous or stressed, or often people say that's the stomach. You ever have a stressful stomach?
Yes, yes, that's true. But I will actually tell you specifically. Kidneys have to do with insecurity or nervousness. Fear, if you will, because basically insecurity, underlying that is fear.
Okay.
All right. Bladder, because kidneys and bladder are paired. Imagine that, right? That's the feeling of being peeved. Imagine that. What's a common thing to say? Well, that, me off. And sure enough, it can affect the bladder.
Yeah.
All right. Now, other ones are, for example, lung. Lung deals with sadness, grief.
Yes.
Okay. And the pair to the lung is large intestine. So that means if you have a lung issue, eventually you have a large intestine issue, or if you have a large intestine issue, eventually you have a lung issue. All right. And that is about letting go. That's the main thing. Difficulty in letting go, not wanting to let go, etc. Okay? Now, spleen should have a bigger board. Spleen has a lot to do with self-esteem. That's the main one I would say. And of course, self-confidence is very closely associated with self-esteem. And then stomach has a lot to do, what do you say stomach here, with not being able to absorb things. So let's say that you're in a class and it's like, geez, I'm just not getting this. Well, that can actually be stomach. can have issues with your stomach, just difficulty in absorbing. Regardless if it's food or information, because actually information is a form of food, mental, but nonetheless food. Hopefully it's good food, not junk food you're absorbing.
Yes.
All right. Fortunately, I've got that. You want to write some? Letting people write down here. Well, I'll write it over here in a different color so you can see it. So we also have heart and small intestine. Those two are paired. And heart has to do with excitement, basically, joy, but there can also be overwhelm or overexcitement can affect the heart. So we'll just say overexcitement of various forms. And again, this is the negative. So each one of these has positives as well. What I'm doing is just focusing on the negative because for the purposes of balancing emotions, that's generally what we're talking about. But just as a quick example, let's take the liver, since we use that first. Anger is the negative, but the positive is passion. That's actually where that emotion is associated. So when you have a balanced liver, then oftentimes a person is quite passionate. Because passion and anger, when you see it displayed, but you may not hear it, looks similar, actually. Words are different. Actions may be different at the outcome, but nonetheless, it is similar. And then, where was I? Yes, small intestine. Often has to do with betrayal. Okay? So there is a simple technique. I really hate to erase that because it's going to help. Let me do it over here. There's a simple technique. So this is the fourth part. See how simple? It really is simple. All right? Maybe not easy, but it's pretty simple. So first step, again, is having balanced biochemistry to start with, because no matter what, you cannot balance your emotions if you don't have balanced biochemistry. And then understanding that at the basis of all our emotions is actually a biochemical helps us to understand the final part. All right? And there's a simple technique. It's called emotion code. And basically the way it works is that you identify, and you can use muscle testing or different means to identify where there actually is what's called a trapped emotion. Now, what does a trapped emotion mean? Quite simply, it's that there is the biochemical, either because of extreme amount of trauma or because of excessive exposure to the same type of situation, that those biochemicals are now toxifying that organ. Okay? So the biochemicals that produce the feeling of anger is now toxifying the liver, or the biochemicals that produce the feelings of fear and insecurity is now toxifying the kidneys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's trapped in that organ, basically. All right? So instead of having chlorine that's affecting, a glandular system somewhere, it's a different type of chemical that would actually make our body have these different emotions. So what you do is you identify what emotion it is. And then you use magnetic therapy. You're familiar with magnetic therapy?
No.
Okay. So in magnetic therapy, the most important thing to keep in mind is that magnets have poles. All right? So there is a north-seeking pole, and there is a south-seeking pole. All right? Now, most will say that the north-seeking pole is energizing, and the south-seeking pole is not. That's the opposite there, to keep it simple. Usually, when you use the technique in emotion code, it's north-seeking pole that you would use. So what I will tell you differs actually once you look up emotion code what they say, but it's actually an important difference. Don't use a magnet like a refrigerator magnet for the technique. The reason is that a refrigerator magnet is in strips. So one strip on the back of the magnet will be north-seeking, and then south-seeking, and then north-seeking, and then south-seeking, and on and on. So basically you have a neutral effect. You see that? And for when you're working with biochemistry, it needs to be one or the other. Typically north-seeking, but sometimes south-seeking. So anyway, don't use refrigerator magnet. Get yourself a, like a science magnet that they use for science class that has a definite north-seeking, definite south-seeking side. And then what you do is you run it along a certain meridian. Now, what is a meridian? Class, what's a meridian? I'll tell you what a meridian is.
I ran across the term and it's like, shoo.
Meridians, you will, yes, you will. Meridians have to do with acupuncture. All right. So meridians are basically channels, and now science thinks it has to do with endorphins in the autonomic nervous system, but the Chinese say that, I don't like that color, let's use it. Too hard to see. That meridians are basically channels in which qi, or energy of the body, runs through, all right? To the organ or gland. Whoops, help if I put it in there. And again, science is saying that has to do with the autonomic nervous system. That's how different endorphins, neurotransmitters actually travel, or the nervous system communicates. But nonetheless, use a meridian. There's two main meridians that can be used. One is in front of the body. What is my problem today? Every time I get up here, I cannot spell. It's front of the body, all right? So it goes basically from the top of the pubic bone to the bottom lip. So you can take your north-seeking pole, run it like this, all the way up, okay? Usually 3 or 4 times of running the magnet along that meridian will be enough, all right? You can actually use muscle testing again to identify if that emotion is removed or not. If it isn't, use the magnet more until it tests that it's strong now against that particular emotion. The second one is in the back of the body, basically along the spine. Now that one's a little bit harder to do yourself. But it runs from the tailbone, okay, all the way to the back of the head, front of the head to the upper lip here. So what you can do is you can simply take your magnet, start here, and just run it down to your cervical spine, up and down. All right? And you do the same thing. You just keep using that magnet until against the emotion it tests strong. Now when you look up emotion code, what you will see is a chart that looks like this. Okay? So it has all different kinds of emotions on it. And what you can do is using muscle testing, you can muscle test, okay, the emotion that is trapped that's affecting me, is it in column A, is it in column B? And then you say, what row is it in? So identify which emotion it is, use a technique I just shared with you, and you can remove that emotion. Okay? Questions about that? All right. It's not in there.
I didn't think so. I had to look just in case.
I understand, yeah. So that is actually a very, very good and simple technique to use. However, it's not enough. So that brings us to the fifth. Brings us to the fifth step. So, do you remember what I said in step number 2? What creates the emotion? So the system is a limbic, right? That generates, part of the brain generates the emotion. But what makes the limbic system engage in activity is our thought process. So we have to deal with our thought process if we're to have balanced emotions. Make sense? That's actually the foundation. All right? So one of the very best ways to deal with the thought process, why am I using green again? Because it really doesn't show up well. Is meditation. So the single purpose of meditation is to turn off constant thinking. Because what drives emotions is a certain kind of thinking over and over and over and over. It's called obsessive thought or obsessive worry, otherwise known as OCD. Yes. So that also is the biggest challenge with meditation, because with most you hear, well, you're supposed to sit there and think about nothing. Yeah, right. Tell a person who is obsessively thinking about something to not think about anything. If they could do that easily, then they're not going to have the problem. All right? Duh. So here's what you do. You find a word that works for you. It doesn't matter what the word is. It can be peace, joy, love, whatever. All right? Beauty, it doesn't matter. And you sit there for 5 minutes starting, and you mentally repeat whatever that word is. So the idea of it is that you're giving your mind something to do. And the longer you do it, as in subsequent days and so forth, the more you'll find that you can actually break the thought process, and it allows the mind to relax. And so once you find that you can do it for 5 minutes, then you go on to 10 minutes, to 15 minutes, and then 20 minutes. When you find that you can do it for 20 minutes at one duration, then you go to 40. No, I'm kidding. Then you go to 20 minutes twice a day. And that's basically, and from there you can do it as often as you want, but that's what you work up to. Now, one thing that's really important is that you use a timer. Why would a timer be important?
Because you don't know how much time is passing.
And the person obsessively thinks. They'll be thinking, geez, how much time has this passed? Am I going to run out of time? Has it been 5 minutes? I don't know. So they're going to be thinking about that. You see? So you have to have a timer in order to turn that part of the thinking off too. Now here's a phenomenon that you will note. Is that when you're thinking about something, there's going to be a part of your mind that starts visualizing things. And it might be visualizing the things that you typically think about. It's just not words that are coming in. It's because that's busy doing something. So now it's visualization of whatever it is. You see your shopping list instead of think about your shopping list. So here's what you do. That part of the mind, you force to start repeating whatever your word is. And I guarantee you it's going to turn your thinking off, because that's pretty hard to do. So basically you're thinking in two areas of your brain the same thought. Isn't that interesting? So when you start doing this technique, you'll see exactly what I mean. If it's a little confusing to you, do it and you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about, because you'll experience it yourself. And again, the longer and longer you do it, what you're actually doing is breaking the pattern of thinking, and you'll find that day to day, your mind is far more peaceful, far more calm. And so then you'll start noticing that there's a lot more opportunity, that you're having balanced emotions, that you are needing techniques such as emotion code less. And when you couple that with balanced biochemistry, you're going to find that you're more and more calm in situations of which you were not ever calm at all in the past. Questions?
Interesting.
It is interesting.
I can already tell my liver was having hissies ages ago.
Mine too, actually. Yep. Yep,
But
indeed.
less so now.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. And oftentimes, when a person starts a program, one of the main things that they notice is that they're a lot calmer. Yeah. In situations that would normally make them angry or whatever the case may be, it doesn't affect them nearly the same way anymore. And that's because of the step one, balancing biochemistry. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important for people to understand that just because you have anxiety or depression, that it's not your brain that's the problem. It's actually your entire physiology and your overall state of health. So the good thing of that is that instead of these mysterious, chemistry vials set in your brain that, you're not enough chemicals in the brain here. That's what you heard that all the time, right? That it's actually, if you improve your overall state of health, your emotions, including depression, anxiety, et cetera, will improve as well, tremendously. In fact, a lot of the journals are showing that something as simple as keeping your blood sugar stable within the brain.
Oh, that helps with anger and heartbeat.
Huge.
Because I've been keeping
Yes.
my blood sugars balanced. I have not gone off on anybody in ages.
That's right.
And
yeah. Low blood
it
sugar
wasn't
creates.
on purpose. It was
Yeah.
just that I would just blood sugar would drop. I'd go,
and
"Rah!"
irritable. Right. That's exactly right. And the other thing is they're finding that the blood sugar dropping in the brain promotes depression. So it can go a long way in helping people who are depressed by keeping stability within the brain. Another part of that is, you might find it interesting because it coincides with what we're discussing, is that typically in the history of a person who has severe depression, they are also severely constipated, historically.
That does not surprise me.
All right? And so if you think about what did I say is the emotion associated with the large intestine? Letting go. So they're having difficulty letting go. It means they're thinking about the past or the future.
Grudges.
They're holding on to things, yes. Yeah. So most of the time people who are depressed is because, unfortunately, they're getting into a pattern of living in the past. Okay? Or not seeing a future. Either way, they're not looking at now. They're either in the past or the future. Either something that occurred and you can't change, or something that hasn't even occurred and still can't change. All right? So oftentimes, if you start helping the colon function properly, so not like forcing it with huge amounts of fiber or whatever the case may be, but actually...
That doesn't work.
No, and it's bad for the colon. All right. But finding what's really at the root of the constipation, just changing that can actually help with depression as well. It may not go away, especially if it's cases of severe depression, but it can definitely help. And of course it will help overall with their health a lot. All right? Any questions about that? See how simple it is? Doesn't even take any more than 20 minutes to talk about.
So many of the things that you talk about, I hear these different things, and I just go, well, I'm pretty much through that, and I'm pretty much through that, but I remember that, and I remember that, and but it's been 6 months since I've been on your program now. And I'm still dealing with some allergy issues that I'm going to ask you about later, but these emotions, I'm a calmer person. I think my kids would say as much too.
Yep. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I was always known for being slightly high-strung, and I could still be a little bit, but it's not near as likely. I'm not near as likely to just go off the handle there.
Right.
And of course, that was my husband actually identified that as my sugar dropping, when I would just out of nowhere just say something that seemed out of character, and he goes, "Did you eat lunch? Have you had food? Do you need a snack?" And I'd go, "Oh, yeah, I probably do." It's like, "I'm sorry, love."
Yeah. Nailed it.
Yeah, he would.
Indeed. All right. So if any of you have any questions, you can leave them, who are online, I should say, leave them in the comment box on the Facebook page, and I will answer them as I can. If anyone is interested in finding out how they can get on a health improvement program, on a total restoration program, and if they qualify for it or not, then what you simply do is text on your mobile device, because you're probably using your phone to watch this, Total Health to 44222, and you'll be sent a text immediately, and you enter your email address and then all the information of how you can get an initial consultation, which is typically $249, but if you text Total Health to 44222, it will only be $62 for initial consultation, and from there we can identify if you are actually a candidate for a total health restoration program or not. If you are, there really is nothing that I found to be more beneficial and more effective at producing health. If you're not, then that's why we're doing the initial consultation, and I will tell you if I cannot help you, so that you save your time, save your money, and hopefully be able to look for other avenues that will help you.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and see you again soon.